Christina in as panelist?
Yes. I'll grab
And I'm going to actually stop the recording for a moment. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. Victoria Howell here, together with Abigail Crisp, Rishi Modi, Christina Dang, who's going to introduce our speaker this evening, Cal grad, Surbhi Sarna, who has so many things behind her name that Christina will talk about, that we'll hear about it later. Just to give you an overview, we'll do our introduction. Surbhi will talk for about 15-20 minutes. I think she is on autopilot talking about her story, which is incredible. And as many of you might know, she started when she was very young, but then came to Cal. So she also is a bear. Go Bears. Christina, I will let you take it away. And I should say, excuse me, we'll have some polls throughout, and there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask lots and lots of questions. I see you're already writing in the Q&A. Feel free to upvote questions if you want in the Q&A, and be interactive with us on the chat. Welcome, everybody. And Christina, thank you for your bravery and being the first person to introduce a speaker.
Pleasure, my pleasure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Dong, and I'm a data science transfer student at Berkeley. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today because when I was a pre-engineering student at my community college, I was often the only or a few females in a large group of men. And that needs to change. So I'm really proud to see amazing women like Surbhi Sarna leading the way in STEM. Surbhi is a Berkeley alumna who received her bachelor's degree in molecular and cell biology. She serves as board director to two innovative healthcare companies, Penumbra Medical and Progenity. Surbhi also founded Envision Medical, and as the former CEO, she led the company to develop a microcatheter for the detection of ovarian cancer. The company sold for $275 million. Surbhi is currently a group partner at Y Combinator, a startup accelerator that has helped launch more than 3,000 companies, including Airbnb, Coinbase, DoorDash, Reddit, and Stripe, to name a few. With her strong entrepreneurial and healthcare background, it is no wonder that Y Combinator appointed Surbhi to be their first ever partner for healthcare and biotech. Surbhi, thank you for being part of Berkeley Changemaker lecture series. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. Doing the talk in person was one of the last large in-person events I did before the pandemic hit, I think. So even though we're not back in person live, it's a pleasure to be with all of you virtually.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Christina. That was a lovely introduction. And Surbhi, I thought we could just start a little bit with your timeline. Christina went through it, but I was going to go ahead and share it so everybody can see it, which I think people can see. If there are any issues, let me know. There are lots of great squares on here, starting with the circle of Cal. We were lucky to have you come. I left something blank on here intentionally, and I think something's not quite finished. But you came and talked to us a good 2 years ago, and it was great to hear from you. And I feel like so much has happened since. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey, and maybe you even want to start before Cal?
Yeah, you know what? I realized that I should have caught this because you shared this with me before, but I actually graduated in 2007. So I was there from 2003 to 2007 and studied molecular and cell biology.
Because you have to do everything at the same time. So you worked at Stanford and at Abbott while you were in school. I love that.
Yeah, Abbott was an internship through the first year after graduating. And then after that, I worked for another device startup before starting Envision, which sold to Boston Scientific in 2018. And now I'm a group partner at Y Combinator.
And you're 3 years younger suddenly.
Yeah, that feels good. That feels good. Okay, fantastic. So maybe I can get right into the story then. Great. Well, I hope that some of you in the audience are hoping to be entrepreneurs in the future. And if so, I would love nothing more than to see your application at Y Combinator when the time is right. And I also hope there's just, folks that want to one day be in leadership roles, because I think that this story and the lessons that come out of it can kind of apply to both entrepreneurs and aspiring leaders. And, not every type of role is like perfect for everybody. So, but my story is that of an entrepreneur. And it actually begins when I was in high school. I was writing a paper on Emerson, and when all of a sudden I felt such a sharp pain in my side that I could barely make it to the kitchen and say, "Mom, my side hurts," before completely blacking out. And the next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. And of course, I didn't know it then, but it was going to be the first of many trips. Eventually, they told me that I was suffering from repeat complex ovarian cysts. But what they couldn't tell me is whether or not that cyst was cancerous or benign, because a purely benign cyst is fluid filled, and they can see that under ultrasound. And a tumor tends to be completely solid, but when it's something in between, there's a big question. And, you would hope that there was something easy that they could do to explore this, to find the answer. But the problem is, still to today, the only definitive way to diagnose ovarian cancer is to do a surgery that not only jeopardizes the woman's fertility, but risks spreading the cancer to the rest of the abdominal cavity. So my family and I were given a choice. Others would call it a non-choice. Wait to see if the cyst dissolves on its own, or go through this invasive procedure. And, it turns out I was one of the lucky ones. It wasn't cancer, but from the unnecessarily long diagnostic time, sort of to the lack of therapeutic options, I knew at that point that I would love to dedicate myself to women's health, and in particular, early detection of ovarian cancer. So that's the fire in which, the good indignation in which I took to Berkeley. And it's an Emerson quote that a good indignation brings out all one's power. And right now, being an entrepreneur, it's like a trending thing. Like, in the Valley especially, those are the wrong reasons to be an entrepreneur. The right reason to be an entrepreneur is to find a problem you really want to solve, and then to validate that problem, something that makes you upset, and then to go for it. And Victoria, I apologize. I'm actually not planning to follow that previous slide deck. So, okay, sorry. So
when you mentioned that quote, I was like, I have that quote.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an awesome quote. It's like, just remember that, right? You can like lean into your good indignation to the thing that makes you upset, and it really helps you come up with solutions to problems, and it gives you the drive that you need to overcome obstacles as you proceed through your own journey. So I finished up high school. I had to drop out of the basketball team and other things that I love to do, because I was sick off and on, but I was lucky enough that by college, everything seemed resolved. And I joined the dorms at UC Berkeley. And so, anyone have a guess as to where I lived?
I'm going to go ahead and put that up as a poll, just so we have it, so you can actually participate, you guys, although I love how everybody's writing it in.
I mean, do I strike you as like Unit 1 girl? Like, what are people thinking?
Surbhi, can you see the polls and how it's coming in right now?
I can't.
All right. Well, I will tell you, I'll cut it off in a minute, but Unit 3 is leading 40%, followed by Unit 1 and 2 are tied around 31%.
Damn, it's that obvious, huh? Unit 3, Priestley girl all the way, man. Sure, some good times.
Let me share those results.
Yeah, look at that.
So actually, you need to tell me, if you don't mind, what does that mean?
Unit 3 is like a more social, has the reputation of being a more social dorm.
Got it.
Is that still the case, guys? Can you help me out in chat? Like, I'm like referring to stuff that happened like 10 years ago. No, shit's been longer. Sorry, didn't mean to cuss. Social is one way to put it. Yeah, okay, so good.
Oh,
Okay.
some.
Yeah, okay, that's it. Yeah, a little bit of partying at Unit 3. Okay, fantastic. So clearly I'm having like a very good time at Cal. I'm also studying. So my degree is in molecular and cell biology. I'm doing a bunch of research in bioengineering. And at the same time, during the summer, I'm working at Stanford Hospital in the anesthesiology OB department, kind of like dipping my toe in the water in women's health. And yeah, it was very, very formative for me. And guys, look, this is one thing I gotta say, I wish that I saw more Berkeley applicants to be entrepreneurs at YC instead of Stanford, because I feel like Berkeley is the perfect breeding ground for entrepreneurs. And you know why? Stuff's not handed to you on a silver platter. Like, you got to go out there and compete and get things done, right? Like, I remember there were 70 applicants for like every research opportunity that was out there. So you know, you got to be clever, you got to be resourceful, you know, in addition to being intelligent. So, I mean,
Can you tell us some of the things that you might have done that were incredibly resourceful?
Yeah, I mean, I would, you know, instead of just at the time, I can't remember what it's called, but there would be all the research opportunities would be on this one website, and like you'd have to apply through there. But instead, what I did is I looked up professors who are researching things that I loved, and I read their papers, and then I emailed them about their academic papers asking questions and for the opportunity to meet. And from there, that's how I would get in, right? So I'd apply through the normal system, but I would take that extra step and like doing research on, you know, like doing research on the professor and reading those academic papers, which are kind of like heavy and not that fun to read and took time away from my partying at Unit 3. But I like did it anyway because it really set me apart. And I kind of carried that lesson through to my sort of early networking days.
So when you talk about your studies, it sounds like, and your background, what you wanted to do, it sounds like you were headed for medical school. So maybe you just took science classes.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know. I remember I had a bunch of my friends from high school, actually, I was lucky, like went to Cal as well. And a couple of them who are now, you know, successful physicians all over the place, they were like kind of exploring med school at the time. And they took me to some like med school prep, like talks, you know, like outside of the normal classes. And I don't know, you know, I still think, especially now in the heart of the pandemic, that a physician is one of the careers that I have absolutely the most respect for. But for me, I always just had this weird thing in my head, right? Like, how many people did the person who invented the X-ray help? Like, how many will he continue to help, right? Or you think of like the inventor of the mRNA vaccine, and how many people is she going to help? And it's just like a scale thing. But you know, the job of physicians and nurses, it's so personal, it's so necessary. But it just very early on, it's like I was trying to study things that would help me better understand the disease state I wanted to solve. I was kind of like single-minded about getting and obtaining that knowledge. And in some cases, you know, one of my favorite classes at Cal, well, we did a poll about this, right? Like,
sure.
Let's put that up.
So let me launch that poll. The question is kind of what people think classes shaped you the most. I'm just going to share it as a poll. Women's studies was taking an early lead. We have philosophy. Let me go ahead and also I can share it this way as well. Just so we can everybody can see it large, and then I'll stop that share. But just so you know, right now, OB, organizational behavior, is leading. There's philosophy, women's studies, computer science, organizational behavior, biology, life sciences, all of the above, or none of the above. I'll leave it up for about 3 more seconds. And share the results so you can see.
Okay, awesome. I mean, I think these are great results because that's basically what it is. It's mixed, right? So certainly when you are a leader, understanding human nature and what incentivizes people is incredibly important. So any class at all that helped me kind of think about the human condition and perspective, I really took to heart, right? So you can read and study like what Socrates talked about with people, and it's still completely relevant. Emerson's quotes are still completely relevant to today, you know? I'm talking about their high level themes outside of anything like racist and sexist they might have said. It was kind of like all of the above really shaped me, you know, probably kind of the women's studies, especially for me, because I wanted to go into women's health. I got really into it while I was at Cal. I was invited to take graduate level courses with a professor, and I was like sitting there like writing insanely long papers on the subject. And I've always been fascinated about the intersection, you know, between women's study, feminism, and women's health. Cal was just a fantastic jumping point for me. I learned so much and so many different ways, right? And so like, it's not just about what you're learning in your classes, it's about all of the extracurricular activities you have, the friendships that you form. You know, I've been in 8 weddings or something, and I think the majority of those women went to Berkeley. And it's like, where now, if I wanted to take further classes in philosophy, where could I do that, you know? So like the opportunities you have in front of you are so immense, just to enjoy kind of that phase that you're in right now. Learn everything you can in every way, you know? All right, so after that, I decided, okay, I talked to a couple of people who all told me like, hey, in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, you should, yeah, no problem at all. You should definitely have a few years of experience before jumping in to start your own company. So I worked at a large company and then a small company. And then my grandmother in India fell very ill with breast cancer. I took some time off to take care of her. And then we lost her. And I think at that point, that good indignation really came back. And a year later, I kind of started on my journey to try to raise my first round of capital. But before then, you know, I had this concept in my head where if we could successfully get into the fallopian tube, and like no one else had a catheter that was able to kind of traverse the body and enter the fallopian tube without causing damage. People had tried, they tried to get FDA approval, and it hadn't happened. But I knew that I just kind of instinctively knew, okay, I think this is a good idea, but at the end of the day, my customers are the ones that have to tell me like, yeah, early detection's a real problem. Conditions of the fallopian tube's a real problem. You should definitely like dedicate your life to this, right? And like, you're kind of barking up the right tree. And when you first,
I just thought that was funny. We said barking up the right tree, since I have barking in the background.
Yeah, there you go. Who let the dogs out? So when you first start networking, right? And this is a question I get from like entrepreneurs or people who want to be entrepreneurs all the time. Like, you're straight out of school, or even if you're a few years out of school, working entry-level jobs. It doesn't arm you with a huge Rolodex. Like, how are you supposed to find the people to help you with this? Like, how was the other, 3 years of work experience that I had, or whatever, it was all in the cardiovascular space. The customers for this new company, they were going to be gynecologists. Like, how in the world was I going to find a gynecologist that I could talk to about this concept? I thought about it for a while, and then I realized I did know one gynecologist. I knew my own. So first I called the front office and I was like, hey, will Dr. Cook talk to me about this great startup idea? Click. It just sounded like another vendor, right? Like they're not going to connect me to the physician. So then I called back and pretended I had a little bellyache, and I was like, oh, my stomach hurts so bad. Like, can I please see Dr. Cook as soon as possible? And while my feet were up in the stirrups with her, and she's like about to begin her examination, I'm like, hey, by the way, I got an awesome company idea for you. And she was just like, her face just said, like, what is going on? This is so awkward, right? Like, you go from this like patient, like physician relationship, like right into this, like, now what? Like, you're trying to sell me something that doesn't exist yet. Like, what's happening? But she was kind enough. She agreed to meet with me, but she was like, not while I'm giving you a pelvic exam. And I was like, fair enough. She was like, let's meet for coffee. And we did that. And she liked the concept, but she introduced me to 3 more physicians to talk to. And out of those physicians, a couple of them liked it, a couple of them didn't. But every time I asked that person to introduce me to more physicians. So all of a sudden, there was like this fanning out effect. And I had dozens of physicians I talked to all over the country. And one of them who really took interest was the head of women's health at Stanford. And she was, really helpful and not just articulating the problem and going back and forth, but she was willing to talk to investors too, All right.
Surbhi, when you are talking to these people, there is a way to talk about it. Forget about that you're talking about, women's areas, reproductive, people are uncomfortable with that. But I mean, any idea to get people to help you.
Yeah.
How do you think, what do you think is a best practice to talk about an idea in a way that people will help you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there, because the idea and the way that the problem is articulated is only part of the reason that someone would choose you to invest. Okay, so after I had customers lined up that said, okay, this is a great concept, I knew that I had to find like business advisors. I never started a company from scratch. Like, I needed to find people who really believed in the concept, who'd help me like put together a business plan and that sort of thing, right? And so it's like, okay, how do I do this? And again, I didn't know anybody, but I was having a drink with the girlfriend who was back in school over winter break. She was back in school for not winter break, but for Christmas. And she was living in Boston at the time. And I was like, hey, Malika, your dad started a company, didn't he? Like, can I go over for dinner and like ask him some questions? And she was like, yeah, sure, come over. And I got to hear his like amazing story about, like coming from India, like establishing himself here, this amazing entrepreneurial journey. But when I asked him for connections to somebody that could help, like, he didn't know anybody, but his wife did. And his wife ended up connecting me to someone who then connected me to someone else, who connected me to my first 3 investors. Okay. And there were a million other connections that had to happen before this occurred. So Victoria asked a great question about like, what is it that allows you to attract people to the table to help you out? There's a couple of things here. First, simplify your idea. Now, this is really, really tough for people because they don't want to simplify their idea. They don't want to be able to, in like 2 sentences, say like, we are a new Airtable that has this additional feature. Like, they don't want to like make the thing that they're doing come across as like too easy to do. But you have to understand that like people have short attention spans. They get bored easily. So the quicker that you can articulate, the more clean of a matter you can articulate what you're doing without making it sound complicated is what attracts people. Generally, people don't think that they're idiots. They think that you can't explain your thing properly. So if you are not like able to use non-technical language to describe what you're doing, they're just like, oh, forget it. This person can't even like talk about what they're doing in a way, like a manner that I can understand. And I'm a very smart person, right? So like, that's the first thing. Now, the woman who introduced me to all of my first investors, her name was Anala, and she's a very successful venture capitalist in the area. She had her own fund. She met with a ton of entrepreneurs. And I asked her later, I was like, why did you decide to take me under your wing? Like, what was different about it? And actually, she named some things that I always do before I meet someone. And guys, look, like, these are pretty straightforward things to do. And it'll be so easy to set yourself apart from other people if you do that. All right, here it is. The first thing you do is crazy research the person that you are about to meet. Know as much about their background and why their background is relevant to you as you possibly can. The number one thing that successful people, all people should value, but especially people that have had some financial success, value is their time. And often the people that you'll be targeting are the ones that have had some financial success, right? And so if you really, really thoroughly do your research on them beforehand, you will be able to, no, it doesn't come off across as weird at all. Like no one's fooling anyone anymore. Like everything is online. It comes across as like you really caring about every minute of the 30 minutes you are giving them. Let me just tell you right now, like someone that asked to meet me for the sake of meeting me without a really direct question as to what I can help them with, and their question is educated based on my background, perfect. I'm delighted to meet them again. I will sit down, you know, because otherwise it just like people like just don't have time for like nebulous conversations. So explain your idea quickly and then come with a solid ask as to why that person's background is perfect for the specific thing that you're looking for. It shows that you respect them, you value their time and all of that. Coming to a meeting unprepared, it just doesn't, like, you'll be just much less likely to get that second meeting, you know? Like what I remember pitching Tim Draper, and I was like, yeah, Tim, like you invested in this, and this, and that relates to my company in this way. And I really think that I could learn from you in these 3 ways. And he's like, yeah, perfect. Like I painted a picture for him. If you spend your time with me, it'll be worth it for these reasons. Okay. The next thing is that during a good conversation where you get right into it, there'll certainly be questions that they ask that make you think or pause or whatever. What is another good way to show a person that you value their time? You follow up with them and answer all of the questions that they asked. If you couldn't answer them then, like I have an email. So this woman that introduced me to all of my first investors and basically unlocked the door for me, her name, so Anala, she asked me a bunch of questions and I could answer them, but I felt like I gave okay answers. I wrote her this long ass email with like all much more thoroughly thought out answers. I sent it to her, then I forwarded it to my then boyfriend, now husband, also a Cal Bear. This is what else you can be doing with your time at Cal. I'm just kidding, ladies and men. Don't worry about that too much. You have so much time. Okay, I got off track. So I wrote this email to Anala, and it was a huge email, and I forwarded it to Rajiv, and I put in the email, Rajiv, this email took me 2 hours to write, right? And at the time, like you have no idea if that stuff is going to pay off, but that's just what it is. You take every meeting, you're super thorough about why you want to meet them, you explain to them why it's worth their time, and you follow up. And basically, let me just tell you guys one thing. Okay. The key to opening up serendipity and like serendipity working in your favor is networking with an open mind. Like in the beginning, Just go out there. Like people, I don't know why this happens, guys. This is like, let me just tell you, you're Berkeley grads, okay? So I want you to go out there, just like have the edge, all right? Right in the beginning, when they don't have a huge Rolodex and they're just like staring at a blank paper, they still will only meet with the person that's like the perfect background for what they're doing. But that's like straight up like not how it works. Like you don't just find that person magically one day. Like you have to keep like networking and networking and networking until like that right person comes about. Okay, so right in the beginning, take those meetings. You never know where they're going to end up. And it just ended up really well for me. And yeah, okay.
Can you talk about that really well? So you had this idea, I don't think you had a prototype yet, and you needed some initial funding. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, sure. Look, after I had all of my customers lined up who told me it was a good idea, after I had my business advisors done, and I had my story down in a succinct way, then and only then did I start talking to investors. Why is this such a point of emphasis? Why am I freaking out about this point, guys? Okay, it's this. Entrepreneurs see the ultimate validation of their product and of themselves and their companies and of everything else when they get a check. They think, oh, if an investor likes this, this is a good idea. Okay, look, one of the reasons I was so happy to join YC, their motto is build something people want. So simple. So your ultimate validation comes from your customers, not from investors. The investors need to be educated on why it's a good idea, not the other way around. They're not going to be the ones that hold the key to tell you it's a good idea. Okay, so I start on my fundraising journey, and I'm looking for just 250,000, but I don't have a prototype. It's a slide deck and a dream at this point. And one after another, it was like rejection and rejection and rejection. Oh, you're too early in the process. You're too young. You don't even have a PhD. Like you're undereducated, whatever. And like, yeah, you're just like so risky, like all of that stuff. And, you know, there's plenty of reasons. Like a lot of what they said was valid. Like, you know, usually to start a successful biotech company, like you usually see these like, you know, executives and that sort of stuff. So I got it, you know, but it didn't really make me feel any less rejected. It was like a terrible, terrible feeling, right? Finally, after, again, guys, it must be 50 rejections, but to be honest, I basically lost count. There was finally this investor named Darshana who was very, very interested in what we were doing. And she asked me questions for like 6 months, like back and forth. And once you find one person at a venture fund who likes your idea and they're totally convinced, the next step is they take you to meet their entire partnership. And then the partnership as a group will make the decision on whether or not to invest, right? And Darshana finally said, hey, listen, I'm gonna invite you out to Boston, like come meet the partnership. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like so excited about this. Like, I can't wait. I go there and I like walk into the conference room and it's super daunting. It's this like beautiful, beautiful building. And there I see a familiar picture, 4 older dudes sitting around a conference table along with Darshana. And guys, like, you know, sometimes when you kill it, like, you know, you killed it. That was like the best pitch I've ever given. I was answering all of their questions. They were totally engaged. Like, I just couldn't, I was like on fire. And like, I knew my pitch like so well at that point that like, I could basically just say the story on autopilot and look at the audience for their reactions and adjust my pitch as I went along, which is something I highly recommend for all of you as well. And my gosh, I was so excited. Darshana walked me back to my car that day, and she was like, okay, listen, I am going to call you tomorrow with some good news. Have a safe flight. Like, that was an awesome presentation. And I knew that, like, I shouldn't count my chickens, but I mean, she's basically telling me like, okay, it went really well. And on the flight home, I think like, gosh, I really crushed it. And like, thank God, because I don't have like any other connections from here. Like, I don't even know where I'm going to go if Darshana says no. And I wait for a call, and the next morning it comes, you know, East Coast. So it's like crack of dawn for me. And I pick up, and she's like, hey, Surbhi. I'm like, hey. She was like, I couldn't get my partnership there. It's a no from us. Oh my God, I was defeated. Like, are you kidding me? My screen's doing a weird like color changing thing. I don't know if it's showing up for all of you, but I'm just going to see if this confuses my my camera left. Okay, I was like so dejected. Like, I crawled underneath my comforter. I remember in bed, and I just like let all the feelings like wash over me. I was like, seriously, I've been thinking about this concept since I was 13. I don't have anywhere else to go. Like, is this really like the end of my journey? Like, I chose what I was going to study at Cal based on doing this. All my first jobs, like everything I did, I thought, how does this apply to starting a company? How does this apply to women's health? Here's the benefit of letting yourself feel emotions, guys. Sometimes emotions help unlock creativity, okay? So I'm sitting there and I realize that Darshana really wanted to say yes. Like, I realized that the no was a lot of hesitation. She said she couldn't get her partnership there. She didn't say that she wasn't there, right? And so, gentlemen, usually when a woman says no, she means no. In this very specific case, she totally meant yes. Okay, so I call her back, and I'm like, hey, Darshana, listen, I know I'm a super risky investment. So if you take the risk with me, I will also take the risk. I will not draw salary for 2 years. I will move back with my parents' place. Just like, tell me what we need to do to get this done. She goes back to her partnership and says, listen, you either invest in Surbhi or let me break contract and invest in her as an individual. And at that point, they were like, well, if you want to invest in her that badly, like, go for it. And that's how I got my very first check, you know? And so I think it's a story, again, about going back to that good indignation, why you're doing what you're doing. Like, how many times the company almost like didn't succeed, you know, like, yeah, thanks. Like, the stories that you find on the internet, it's just what? It's like success and success and success. That's because that's like what people like to read. But let me tell you, like, when the Airbnb founders tell their story at Y Combinator, like, the amount of times that they just met huge, huge roadblocks. So, yeah, I was off to the races, you know. I had the first like check in hand, and now all I had to do was like hire a really seasoned team, right?
And you still need to make your prototype, right? That's all.
I mean, I still have to do everything. That's the thing. When you're this is what happens when you're an entrepreneur. You're like, how am I going to raise money? How am I going to raise money? And then you raise the money, and then you're like, oh shit, like, now I have the money, and people are like expecting things from me, and I better like go execute on these things, you know? And I had to find a team, and I found them, guys. Like, so the investors, it's like, don't rely on them for validation, because I only had like basically a few investors each time say yes to me, and like, look at the outcome, right? I raised like $17 million. I sold it for 275 million. I got to like go through do my whole dream, make it all a reality. And had I let all of the no's discourage me, I would have never done that, right? Yeah. And so you have the money, now you want to hire a team, and where do you start? Well, one of the first people I hired was my previous boss, and look, like this question that just came in the chat, it's so relevant to the story right now. I'll just, read it out loud, which is like, how do you convince people to join if there's X months of runway? Look, there's some people who are more adventurous than others. Like, you're looking for the person that wants a little bit of adventure in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, they want the big upside. And it's good. It's like a self-selecting thing. Like, not everybody wants that. Like, they get their first job out of school at Google, they're there for 10 years. Nothing wrong with that. They enjoy like the work-life balance and the perks and the delicious lunches and just like the stability, which is fantastic,
There is something that you're actually not saying, I think, Surbhi, and that is you hired your person who used to be your boss. People so often leave a job and leave a job. But it sounds like you maintain your connections and that's been interesting for you.
Yeah, I loved maintaining, like, look, at the end of the day, I might come across as like a little cranky to you guys right now, but I really love people. I care about people. I want to maintain people that come into my life, not toxic people. Like, you end up like, after college especially, like you end up like tassing a lot of those folks, but like certainly the whole way through, you think about like relationships and people as like the favors you do other people, they come back around in like big ways, and I was the reason I was able to hire my previous boss is that because when I worked for him, I worked my ass off and I did good work and I cared about it. And he saw that. And so even though I was like a new entrepreneur, he just believed that I would learn. And I also gave him the opportunity to sign a consulting agreement before agreeing to join me full time. So he kind of like had a taste of it. And I saw something come up with the chat about like how the best people can be like hardest to like get to your team. And like, that's absolutely true. Okay, can I give you guys some tips on how to like attract amazing people to work for you full time? Look, again, this is how I feel about people that spend time with me, like all of you are doing right now. I see time as God's, as nature's, whatever it might be, whatever you believe in, a hybrid of the two, the greatest gift. Like when my girlfriends know how corny I am. I'll be having a drink with them and I'll be like looking at them like, your time is a gift. Because it is. There's like a million things that like people could be doing with their time, but they're choosing to spend that time with you. And of course I felt that way about the people that I hired, right? Of course I felt that way. These people were sometimes leaving like these big secure jobs. And so I wanted to give them something. I was a realist about the fact that my company was probably going to fail because most startups fail. I didn't want them walking out the door empty-handed, right? In case that happened, I wanted to give them something. So I always asked myself this question. Of course, I started with, what can this person do for the company? But I always thought to myself, what can the company do for this person? And not in some bullshit level, like, oh, here's some perks. Like, here's a free lunch. No, you're a startup. There's no free lunch. It was, what do they have on their resume? Okay, that's great. What can I add to it? So even if the company goes down, they'll have learned a new skill set that they can like bring to the next job, right? And that just gave me comfort because I knew that they were learning something new that they hadn't gotten in their previous jobs. And even if the company went forward, it didn't go forward, like they would have something, right? They would like have something there tangible to hold, and there's something else, right, about retaining people. So they're building their resume. They know that you care about them. That's another thing. There was one of our employees that called Envision La Familia. And we got that term because of like how much we looked after each other. So you guys, I know this sounds so cheesy, so just bear with me, right? Because I can only be one way with you, which is real. I just like, that's it. I'm speaking to a bunch of Cal Bears right now. You might think that the most rewarding part about starting a company is the exit. You might think the most rewarding part is like sketching out a prototype and seeing it come to life, seeing people use your product. All of that's so fascinating, right? But for me, it was my team. It was my team. It was the work that we did together. It was how reliable we are with each other. So you build a culture that's an extension of yourself, and people buy into it or they don't. It's a self-selecting thing. You can't please everyone. We live in this like please everyone type of culture, right? Like, don't you think like social media does that a little bit too? Like the focus on like how many followers instead of like just like the quality of the connections that you have, right? Anyway, let me tell you a story about Jesus, okay? And I'll give you maybe a flavor of how I ran the company. Okay, so Jesus, he crossed the border from Mexico when he was really young. And he did so because his mother passed away from cancer suddenly. And he'll tell stories about like the village that he was in, where they weren't even able to diagnose what was going on with her. He thinks now, after learning about ovarian cancer while being at Envision, that that's what it was. And so he crossed the border and he ended up in San Francisco. And in order to have a roof over his head, he made a deal with people that he would like clean bars after the bar shut down at 2 a.m. instead of being a kid going to school. But his work ethic didn't keep him there for long. He just kept on finding opportunities. He ended up on a manufacturing line of a big company, but he couldn't help it. He didn't just want to build the device the way the instructions said. He found better ways to do it. He'd flag it to his superiors. So even without, completing high school, he ended up having all these really great technician jobs. And so one day, Jesus and I, we're in Mexico for a clinical study. He's also introduced the joy of tequila. I'm just going to stop the story for a second and say, right now, a lot of you are like destroying the joy of tequila for one another by taking cheap tequila shots. I just want to flag, because it took me like 10 years to get over tequila shots from Cal. I just want to flag to you guys that really good tequila is not meant to be shot. It's meant to be sipped. Jesus taught me that, so you can thank Jesus for this. And it's delicious. It's amazing. Reserva de la Familia, if anyone needs a recommendation. Okay. All right. So let's go back to Jesus. So Jesus and I were sitting in a room with a bunch of other employees, and we're waiting for a physician to come in. We're in the middle of a clinical study, and physician comes in and he starts showing off this like beautiful limited edition Rolex that he has. And after the physician leaves, I noticed that like Jesus is looking a little bit down. And I say, Jesus, what's up? Because this guy's usually jovial. He wears like lucky red socks to our cases. He calls us La Familia. He's so hardworking. I'm like, Jesus, this is unusual. Like, why do you look so down? And he said, Surbhi, you know what? Like, no matter how hard I work, not only am I never going to own a Rolex, even though I love watches, I'm not even going to be able to send my 3 kids to school. And basically at that point, I made him a promise and I made myself a promise. And I said, Jesus, listen, if you hang with me through this journey, because we were at the very beginning at that point, if you stay with me through this journey, not only will you wear a Rolex, you'll also be able to send your kids to college. I'll be the one that gets you the Rolex. And all of that's come true, and his kid's just finishing his first year, And so these are the things that like drive you and keep you going when you're in a leadership position, like how to better the lives of your employees, how to bring them something as they bring you something, and you end up building something beautiful together.
Surbhi, it is so incredible to listen to you tell the story. I could listen to you for hours to come, but I know there are all these questions also about Y Combinator. And I'm wondering if you would be okay if in the course of the questions, maybe you answer a little bit more about Envision. But I thought that if we bring some of the students in to ask some of the questions, your journey toward Y Combinator will come out. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. Let me just say one thing. Okay, so then all of this happened. We got FDA clearance. We did a clinical trial. And then we had 4 different companies that wanted to buy ours. And then that's when I sold the company to Boston Scientific. But those are the key elements of the story. And now we can get to.
I think
Y
that
Combinator.
Abby and Rishi will start to bring some people in. And if not, I'll do it really quickly here. But I am wondering, when you, as we're pulling people in, can you talk about how it came about, even that Boston Scientific approached you all? Did you want to be sold, or how did that happen?
No, I mean, I was totally focused on just like building and growing the company. And I wasn't really thinking about like selling the company, but we just got approached, and it ended up being a competitive process. And as the price went up, it became harder to say no. Plus, I love the culture of the Boston Scientific guys that came in, to do diligence and work with us. And yeah.
So interesting. So Carla had kind of a question that talks a little bit about entrepreneurship and then going in. And I'll let Carla, I'll just let you go ahead and ask it, and I'll take a back seat and we'll have students come in.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for your story. It's so really nice to have female founders also. Raquel is also here. She's my co-founder, so we are really happy to listen to you. I have 2 questions. Why you become a partner at YC and not still an entrepreneur path? And other question is, how do you engage with people that you are interested, but it's just the beginning? So how that can come along? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the decision of what to do next after I sold the company, it was like based on a couple of different things. One thing that I hope all of you do in your careers and is take care of yourselves and make sure you don't burn out. And I had just like worked so hard that I just needed some time before I could like articulate a new problem and go after it with the same vigor as I did. I mean, I used to keep a whiteboard in my shower, guys. Like, I was on working all the time. There was no stopping. And I just did not pay attention to anything else. The other thing is I fell in love with the Y Combinator job. It started off as like a consulting type thing. But I just love working with entrepreneurs, and kind of, what a great way to inspire more and more innovation to get out there. And Carla, you had a second question about how to attract people when you're in the very beginning.
Yeah, when you meet someone that, for example, that happened to us recently because we just moved to Berkeley. So you feel that that person can help you in the future, but you have small time to engage them.
You mean you don't have like a lot of time when you're sitting in front of them? It's exactly. Like, get to your points quickly. This is what I always tell entrepreneurs. Like, think about the 3 most compelling, important things about your company, and don't use extra words. Just say the things and do research on them. All of the stuff we talked about in the beginning. You can have a super productive meeting in 10 minutes if you're like, follow the stuff I gave you.
Would you use Loom for that? Sending information before the meeting, like 1 minute video about what you are talking about?
No,
okay.
No, I didn't do anything.
More personal. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Raquel, I think it might be a good idea for you to ask your question now too.
Yes, sure. Well, nice to meet you, Surbhi, and thank you very much for all the explanation. Well, my question was, we know that you did that exit of your company. That was like your little kid and everything. And it seems that an exit is success. It's something like an operation successful and so on. But what was the bad part or the most difficult part of the exit? Because obviously maybe you didn't want to sell it in the beginning. And I guess that the transition also would be hard. So how was for you?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think for every entrepreneur, for every CEO, it's really tricky to not have the ultimate last say in like what happens to the product and the device. I mean, at that point, you're sharing the decision-making power with, you're giving the decision-making power to the acquirer. So that's always a very big adjustment. And yeah, I think that's like the most challenging part, is like knowing when it's time to let go and start your next chapter. That can be extremely tricky. And I'm so happy that for me, the next chapter is Y Combinator, but it certainly takes some time to get there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Raquel. We've got some more, like really getting into Y Combinator questions. Jose, would you come in and ask your question?
Hello, everyone. So I'd like to start by saying thanking you very, very much for taking the time to come and meet with us. My question was, from your experience at Y Combinator and emerging biotech companies, what would you predict the biggest change in the healthcare industry to be in the coming years?
Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff right now. It's like such an exciting time to be in healthcare, like we've learned so much about human nature through this pandemic, right? And one of the things we've learned is that we can actually accomplish like much more online than we thought we could do. So I think telemedicine right now and telemedicine solutions is just making enormous leaps forward. This idea of receiving care remote, of making, getting even medications prescribed remotely, like all of that is just incredible. Our base understanding of science and scientific research has also exploded with this mRNA-based vaccines. There's currently one in trials for HIV. It's just incredible, incredible, incredible. Like I just cannot wait to see what the next 10 years brings us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jose. I guess we'll ask Theo or Teo. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Theo, it's good. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for sharing this amazing and inspiring journey. My question is related to my personal journey, because I'm founder of what could be considered as a hard tech startup, and we just applied to IT. And I was wondering, how do you evaluate hard tech startup, especially when they are early, such as YC?
Yeah, that's a fantastic. That's a really fantastic question. So the way that I look at hard tech devices is, first, I look at the entrepreneur's background, right? And why are they doing this? Are they well qualified to do it? Kind of what do they have in not just, experience, but also education? Do they understand how hard it is to build something? Because like people don't always understand like how hard it is to build something. And then after that, I assess opportunities in sort of tech and hard tech the same way, in terms of how big is this market? How long is it going to take to address the need? How many customer conversations have they done? One thing about hard tech that I find that entrepreneurs don't always think through is like, what are your margins? Meaning, if you could make like $500 every time the piece of hard tech is used, but it costs you $400 to make it, and it's only a margin of $100, like that's really hard to make work. You know what I mean? And so looking at sort of margins and how much every component costs and being really thorough about that up front is definitely something to think through.
Okay, thank you so much.
Surbhi, we have some really in-depth questions on Y Combinator. Franklin, man, oh man, did you apply to Y Combinator? I like this question.
Yeah, so I was actually filling out the YC application last night. I'm currently an ML accelerator startup, which classify as a hard tech for semiconductors. So my budgeting goes through like this, right? So we have a 500K deal, and we have 125K for 7%, and then a 375K for the MFN clause. Now, how should a hard tech company plan knowing 500K would only give us like one shot to make this product work, or it won't work, or twice half a shot? Because otherwise, if we can't make it, then we might take a huge dilution hit given the MFN clause. So I just want to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to say this, but if you can't like make your device work, if you fail and the 500K, you won't be able to raise money and it won't matter.
Yeah, okay, I see. Thanks.
Yeah. So instead, one of the reasons that folks were really pushing for the 500K deal is specifically for hard tech, for biotech, and for healthcare who need more money up front to make progress. So if you're coming from like, if you have zero, if you have nothing, the 125 where we're offering, it makes it really hard. It puts a lot of pressure on that entrepreneur to find other funding. But with the 500 now, it's basically a dream deal, guys. It's a dream deal because what we say is, we'll take 7% for the initial 125, but the rest of it, take it now, but we won't say how much equity we'll take for it exactly. Whatever you raise from in the future. So we're like betting on like most favored nation, like whatever you raise in the future, that's where we'll convert, right? So like if you do like gangbusters, okay, we're only going to get a small percentage for that that additional 300K or so that we're giving you. But if you had a lot of trouble raising, like at least you have that money from us to show more progress, But at the point where like nothing's working at 500K, you're not raising more money.
Oh,
like,
yeah, I get what you're saying. So I guess probably what I should ask is say we have like discrete milestones to hit, like 4 or 5 milestones to hit before burning out 500K. Like what sort of milestones should hard tech company hit? I'm not sure if I'm asking this correctly, but
no,
yeah.
you totally are. You're asking a great question. And that is like, what are the milestones specifically for hard tech companies? Okay, that's great. So one thing is technical risk mitigation, right? Being able to explain what you need to build in your product and why you have the right team to do so is a really big deal. Hey guys, I have to build a machine to do X, Y, and Z. The hardest part about doing this is this optical component. But let me tell you why we feel confident that we can find the right optical expert to work on this for us, or what our clear line of sight is to solving this problem. Second, a lot of the times for hard tech, it isn't a direct to consumer company. Many times it's like a B2B play, or business to business play. And in that case, you can actually get letters of support or letters from intent from your customers saying, hey, once this product is built, we would absolutely use it, and this is how much we would pay for it. So that stuff goes a long, long way. And then doing market exercises is another issue with hard tech compared to software and tech. The markets can be much smaller, so you can work on a full marketing model even before having any money, and use that as a milestone as well.
That's great. Franklin, I just want to give you kudos.
Yeah, thank you.
For when Surbhi gave you that answer, you didn't even physically move back. I mean, I think that's a sign of you are ready and you're like, what do I need? So that's an example for everybody in this class. So that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nice work. My job is talking to entrepreneurs like all day long. And as you can tell, my personality is like super straightforward. Most entrepreneurs like that, So I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. Here's the answer, But don't get me wrong. I care deeply about the work that I do.
I think David had a question, and I don't know that I still see him on. But I think I'm going to ask it for him. And how about some advice on entering Y Combinator?
Yeah, I mean, so we get, I think this time we got like 16,000 applications for like 350 spots or something like that. And so it's an extremely competitive process. And of course, because of like Airbnb and, all of these other companies that have gone through it, doing so well, there's definitely a lot of demand. What I can tell you is that everybody if you make it to the interview, everyone that's interviewing you has been an entrepreneur before, and they're very good at reading bullshit. I told myself I wouldn't cuss again, but like I couldn't like find a better word for it.
Technical word.
Yeah. Like we can just tell right away. Like we're not like some VC that like, you know, they were like consultants first and then they just like ended up in venture. It's like all of us are actual entrepreneurs that have built companies. And so when we and entrepreneurs being really authentic with us and like answering questions like thoughtfully, it shows, you know. So spend a lot of time on the application itself. We read every word. And then just be extremely straightforward during the interview, right? Because we're not like, you guys are early stage entrepreneurs. Like we're not for 1 second like expecting everything to be perfect and rosy and like there's no issues, you know. Just like tell us what the issues are if it comes up naturally. Don't just like volunteer the issues, that's too honest. If it comes up naturally, we ask you a question about something, like just answer it in a straightforward way. Big deal.
That's great. Thank you. Broman, you want to come on in? I know you've had maybe 3 different questions you're thinking about.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for coming. This is one of the most exciting speakers we had. My earlier question was a little more similar to another student, so I've changed a little bit, but I previously applied for Y Combinator and learned so much of the process. I did get rejected, unfortunately, but I got an email saying that it was a really great application, encouraging to apply for next cycle. And so I was wondering, as a repeat applicant, which Y Combinator encourages, what are some advice you would give for a new subsequent application? Things we can improve on. I know Y Combinator has some more articles and information about this, but anything that you can give us from like the inside eye about this.
So whatever reject email you got, the partner that wrote it spent time on it. So like if you imagine, like if you can imagine that many like applications and like that many like interviews, and then we are every day at the end of a long interview day, because we're entrepreneurs, we all take this like very seriously. We reply to every single person that we interviewed, and we put like time, like true time into like giving you feedback. And so if there is a partner that like they wrote something like in your rejection email, it's usually not fluff. It's, I don't know, can you guys hear my kids screaming in the background? I'm sorry about that. Okay, it's usually not fluff. It's like truly, I'm like trying to see if I have a noise cancellation option here. It's truly like something that they've like taken time to put in, to like taken time to write to you. Like we love it, guys, because this is just how people are. We love it when we can tell you've made changes based on our feedback.
I think that's fantastic. To be exactly that direct too, Roman. Like, here's what I heard, here's what we're doing.
Right. Thank you for answering.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes, and I think that some people at your house are probably anxious about that 10 minutes. Are you okay to go? We can't hear your kids.
Okay, great.
My dog's louder than your kids. So why don't actually, Sukriti, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, Surbhi, thank you so much. I love the actionable advice that you gave us today. And the question that I had was honestly way more generalized than the previous ones. I was just wondering, how did you deal with setbacks or failures during your entrepreneurial journey? Because honestly, there are so many in mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I used to try my best to look, here's the thing. When you got knocked down, you kind of have to get up really quickly and like move on to the next one, because otherwise you sort of like lose that opportunity to continue. So I remember once I was like in this brutal pitch with these like VCs that were such jackasses that in the middle of me presenting, they started talking to each other like I wasn't there. And I had 3 more pitches lined up the next, like right directly after that. And I felt it and I embraced it, and I even mentioned it to a team member, like we talked about it. And then I got out there and I crushed it. And the next 3 people I talked to, I raised from on that same day. So it's about doing like the right level and the right kind of internalizing and understanding. You know what I mean? Like not everybody you talk to is going to love the idea. And really what kept me going more than anything was my good inclination.
That's great. I'm going to plow through these and I hope that's all right.
For sure.
Jeremy, you want to ask your question next? Thank you very much, Sukriti. And can you tell me how to pronounce your name just in case?
No, that's great. Sukriti.
Okay. Jeremy, you're
sure,
on.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for your story. It's an amazing and inspiring journey. And I just wanted to know what was your point of view on the World Theranos thing with Elizabeth Holmes?
Yeah, nothing. No comment there really. She was like another, it's a fair question, and everything came out about her happened in the middle of me trying to do a fundraising round, and I was also a woman doing a diagnostic company, but like I do not badmouth other women by just a rule. So
that was definitely not the point of it, of my question.
No, I just saying, I know it totally wasn't.
I think I think it's valid. And Jeremy, I appreciate your asking that question. Believe it or not, I've actually asked Elizabeth to come and speak. How about that?
Interesting. Yeah, no, I only meant to say that I can't, like, yeah, it made things more complicated, but I can't really say more than that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Is it Jaishin Li?
Yeah, hi. It's actually Daxing, but you're really close. Thank you for coming, and I really appreciate how straightforward you can deal with questions and answer in a very succinct way. And my question is that I am not an entrepreneur, but I am very interested in the concept of joining and fighting for something that I really care about and see it grow myself so that I can sustain on my own. But to be honest, I am not that courageous. And when I graduate, I can believe it, it's in May, I'll be joining some company and working to accumulate some like initial wealth of mine so that I could do stuff in the end. But to be honest, I am not sure about, how do you determine whether something, a product, an industry, a company is worth working there? You could see a future out of it. You could see yourself believing in that concept and work yourself through it. I mean, it's really perplexed me these times when I'm standing at the crosswalk trying to decide what to do with my life.
This is such a great question, and thank you for answering it. And you are already winning because you're asking yourself this question. And I think the key thing to do here is to not get stuck. So you've chosen a path forward, and the beautiful thing about choosing career paths is they aren't permanent unless you let them become that way. Like I think it was Steve Jobs, right? At a speech he gave at Stanford, like he used to look in the mirror every day and like ask himself if he was happy, and if the answer was no, too many days in a row, he would change something. And I think like there's no way that I can articulate that better than he is. Like he did, like you go down a certain path and then you just see how it feels to you, but you won't know until you try. I know some people who, like, you're at the crossroads, like you said, but you've chosen a path and you're going to go into that path. I know people who get stuck at the crosswalk. Don't do that. The other thing is, like, when you start whatever you do, like having that a little bit of initial wealth, that initial security, job experience, that's all great. don't just think about what that job isn't, think about what it is. Like really try to express gratitude for whatever moment you're in, for whatever opportunity you're given, because then it allows you to be really honest and comfortable with yourself about if it's the right fit. Because you'll know if you decided to leave that you were as open-minded about that opportunity as possible.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. We have about time for 2 or 3 more questions. I'm going to post our code for everybody. And just so you know, Surbhi, that's what I'm doing so that people can give feedback. But I'm going to go ahead and ask Max to ask his question.
Yeah, Surbhi, thanks so much. I actually work at a university and get a lot of these talks, but yours is way more fun. So I'm really enjoying this. One thing I'm actually interested in is how do you see the board of directors as a success resource over time to your own startup? But also, how do you do it now as a board member yourself? I saw on LinkedIn you have a couple of board positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real role of any board is not try to interfere and make too many day-to-day decisions, but just to lend the leadership like team support when they need it, you know? I think the board members that have kind of the most trouble being board members that bring a lot of value to the table, they assume that they know more than the people who are running the company on a day-to-day basis. And so I think their role is to be a really good listener and offer advice and steer things like when needed, but not to meddle too much. Like at the point that you're meddling too much, there's probably time for like a CEO replacement, you know? Yeah.
But looking back, was it difficult to have like a good board composition over time when you look on your story? Was that like the case, or what do you think it wasn't?
At the end of the day, my board was very supportive. Sometimes these things are less in your control because it's like ultimately who has given you, you know, money, they tend to get a board seat.
Okay, yeah.
And then, I mean, it's different for like the publicly traded companies whose board I sit on, but for startups and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I have 2 really big questions, Surbhi. I don't know if we'll get through it, but Jennifer, you want to go next? And if Jennifer's not ready, okay.
Sorry, I'm here. Thank you so much, Surbhi, for just being super awesome, and I love the cursing. Super straightforward, so keep it up. I think one of the challenges that I'm coming across is like trying to get people to feel invested or motivated or just care about the problem I'm talking about, which is related to mental wellness for like underrepresented people. I think mental wellness is already like, you know, sometimes easy to dismiss. So it's already a problem in itself, but also for underrepresented people, like people of color, I think it's like not really relatable to a lot of people. And so I'm wondering, how do you make a problem that seems like it's not super relatable to be relatable to someone who's maybe not passionate in the same space as you are? I think those are some of the challenges, and wondering if you ever came across that, which I think you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely not everybody was interested in women's health. So there's 2 parts to this answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
One is that often, even if people haven't gone through the same experience that you have, if you're willing to share a story, like you guys don't know Jesus, hopefully like you love Jesus, like just like hearing about him. And you guys probably have never had ovarian cysts, but you can kind of imagine what that did to my high school experience. And so sometimes, and Tim Draper was actually the one who taught me to talk about my personal experience, like right out of the gate. So it's amazing how people will relate to you if they can tell you're just like being honest and open about that situation. And these days, I feel like that authenticity is really easy to spot because there's the way that society is set up right now is when you're inauthentic and you're trying to put up a certain presentation, that's when you get rewarded. So as a result of that, like when you are authentic, people can really relate to it, I think. the other part of it is like, you just remember that you do not need to get everybody to be into what you're doing. All you need is one yes. And that should just like keep pushing you to go, like eventually what you're working on will resonate someone.
Wow, thank you. That's really amazing advice. I've probably been looking at it the wrong way, thinking like, oh, if like X number of people seem disinterested, maybe like I'm doing something wrong. But it seems like for you, you said you only needed like a few investors and you made such an impact. So
Yeah,
thank you.
exactly. It just needs to resonate for a couple of people, you know.
Okay.
Surbhi, I think that we're at the bottom of the hour and you have resonated with more than just a couple of people. Thank you. I know we've had some issues with getting into that B course code. I really want you all to be able to give feedback so I can pass it on to Surbhi. The B course code is YC, capital letters, and then innovator in lowercase letters. So capital Y, capital C, innovator in lowercase letters. Surbhi, I have one last question to ask. And if somebody wanted to be an intern or work at Y Combinator, how would one go about that?
If you want to be a group partner, generally you have to start and sell a company first. If it's like we do, and I don't think we do interns, I can look into it. In other places, you can definitely join the software team. Like we have so much amazing internal software, so you should keep your eye out for those job opportunities. And then we also have an amazing reach out, PR team, admissions team. So there's a lot of opportunities outside of like working with entrepreneurs that are available at Y Combinator. It's like a 70-person organization at this point.
Thank you. Thank you for being gracious, for coming back a second time, for having this fascinating journey, and for sharing with us during family time.
Yeah, no, of course. It was my absolute pleasure to be here. Guys, these are such incredible questions that you had to ask me. I kind of wish I shut up a little bit earlier so I could get all to them, because they have each and every one of them I'm thankful for. They've all been so thoughtful.
We're happy to do a part 2.
All right. Sounds good.
Wishing you a good night. Best of luck on everything. It'll be fun to follow what's happening with I'm now calling it Biocombinator, Y Combinator.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to see some applications from some Cal Bears, guys.
Go Bears. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Surbhi, I'll let you go. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes if there are questions from the students.
All right, perfect. Thanks again.